Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Psychology of Lockdown. This is our third installment. I'm joined by George Roche of the Line International. They are a group out of Canada. They've been heavily promoting freedom from lockdown, doing protests up there in Toronto on a weekly basis now for a couple of months. But we've been doing this series because we had such a difficult time having conversations with people, noticing other people are shutting down, if you're against the lockdowns, if you question the COVID narrative. And so I brought George on. If you've seen the first two episodes, you know this, but he has been influenced by a John Bradshaw, who is a psychoanalyst who has done a family systems therapy, which is a system of understanding people's psychology based on how they were raised and what the dynamics were within the family. And our theory is that people are really dealing with essentially an abusive father figure that is called the government. And a lot of these reactions, the cognitive dissonance, the confirmation bias, the need to do what they're told by the authority figure are actually rooted in these deeper psychological foundations that were formed during childhood and within the family dynamic. So this whole series concerns a concept called mystification. That was episode 1. Last week we covered magical thinking, and now for episode number 3, we are going to discuss yearning for fulfillment as we go through the 13 points that John Bradshaw has created, the characteristics of mystification, and then we're going to end with a 15th episode that is about individuation, which is what happens to you as you have freed yourself from these psychological bonds, these familial bonds that were created based on these toxic relationships, these dysfunctional relationships, and you awaken into your own ability to make choices for yourself. So, George, how are you doing today? You ready to talk about yearning for fulfillment?
I'm yearning.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
Feeling the yearn.
Let's get everybody yearning so we can complete this.
Yeah.
You know, I've talked about this before, where families are a social system, and everybody has the same needs as everyone else. So the family as a social system is definitely the matrix where character formation occurs. You develop your belief system. You develop how you should be relating to the world at that age, and then later on down the life.
Mm-hmm.
Like much of what you learned in childhood will be revisited, recycled in various social situations that you have adopted from your family's social circle. So the family is an enormously important playground, breeding ground for this stuff, where people later on in life won't only be faced with reliving some of the decisions they made about relationships, but some of the decisions about how they live their lives in general.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very important when we are talking about mystification and we're talking about somnambulism, people who are asleep. They think they're awake making decisions. How do we know that they are awake making decisions? How do we know this?
Right.
And how is it easy for people to tell, either for themselves, not that anybody is very thrilled about doing that work. How awake am I? People don't generally wake up and ask that question. But more so, how do other people make a determination about the awareness level of the person maybe that they're married with, or who they work with, who they play in a band with,
mm-hmm.
who they go for a walk or a jog with? How do we know that this person is actually somebody we can get along with for a long period of time? You know, recently I've had several messages about people ending relationships, and not short ones, 15, 20, 25 years. I don't know who my wife is. I don't know who my husband is. This is very sad. People are realizing for the first time in their history with these people who they're actually with. That's concerning, but it proves what we've been talking about. But people are not quite sure. They're still guessing. We want to remove the guessing. That's part of what this series is about for me.
Right.
Because I want people to go in knowing, not go in to find out, but go in actually knowing. Am I awake? Are parts of me still in need of my reclaiming, of their reclaiming? Am I okay with who I am? I mean, these are enormously important questions. I say to people, and I have said in my seminars, there are two very important questions that people must ask themselves, and they are this. The first one is, how do I feel about how I'm thinking? And the second question is, what do I think about how I'm feeling? These are very important questions when it comes to self-connection.
Right.
When we refer to people who are yearning for fulfillment, what we find is a yearning because of emptiness, a loss of self-connection and of authenticity about self. And the reality is that a person who has not claimed an authentic self is going to be mourning for that self, which is the root of seeking such fulfillment. What are they telling us? They're telling us that they did not get, again, their childhood developmental dependency needs met. The cups are not full. So this person who's yearning for fulfillment, what's it like to be in a relationship with them? They're seldom involved in the conversation. They seem to be wandering off in other places. They're trying to, pretend to be involved in what they're doing, but they're really not involved in what they're doing. They're not fully present in a lived experience. Why? Because they're still stuck in the past. We have to understand that the purpose of fulfillment means we've got to finish the business of childhood, because we're going to carry that with us forever into every relationship, professional and personal. There's no escaping it. People have to understand they're only human. They're not more and they're not less. So self-acceptance is vital here. Some people, because of the shame that they carry and the toxicity about how that makes them feel, that they're incomplete, they're unlovable, there's no significance to them, they feel almost invisible, is a highly common trait of a person who is yearning for fulfillment. Right. So when we talk about mourning the loss of the authentic self, authenticity comes from needs being met, because through my needs being met, I get taught what human is. So if my human needs are not met, I haven't finished learning about what human is. It's the information that needs gives every human being that is missing in most people today. It's that information. And what they haven't figured out, the answer is, or to the question is, who am I and how did I become what I am today? Mm-hmm. See, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeating it. So insatiability is a huge part of yearning for fulfillment. I got to get it now. There's never going to be enough. You see, everything in childhood was scarce, and I don't want to put that down for people. There are people who have economic circumstances. Maybe they came from a divorced family. Maybe there was high levels of abuse going on, or mom was always absent because she had to pay the bills, so she couldn't be there to meet her children's needs. There's a lot of innocence around this, where people just have circumstances that inevitably were a stark part of their reality and existence. There was no way for them to get around not meeting their kids' needs. I don't want to blame those parents.
It sounds like, if you don't heal from these, you don't have to judge. It's not that the parents did a terrible job. We all have our life circumstances. It's just that we have to heal, or the cycle will repeat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, when people are yearning for fulfillment, what they are basically showing us is that they mostly live on the sidelines. They're not really involved in what they're doing. These are the people who go to soccer games. They would not kick the ball, okay? But they're okay observing. They're okay observing. A lot of groupthink from these insatiable people. They're scanning the faces of other people to see what other people think is right. Because, again, we need to get the information that our needs teach us about ourselves. Mm-hmm. And when that information is missing, we are going to be seeking it inevitably. Biologically, it's a part of our nature to seek completion. So naturally, the emptiness is about not getting one's needs met. It's about the constant focus throughout one's life to complete getting those needs met through various sources. Some people use addiction, some people use alcoholism, some people use sex, some people use reading addiction, work addiction. There's all kinds of addiction that speaks to this person who's yearning for fulfillment. It's actually a form of spiritual bankruptcy.
Right.
So if
Like
how can I
you're avoiding dealing with who you really are because you don't think you're good enough to deserve to be fulfilled, to have your needs met. And so you're just finding anything else that can avoid you having to deal with what's going on that's actually the root of the problem.
right? And if it was the solution, you wouldn't need so much of it. If
Right.
that was the answer,
Yeah.
you wouldn't keep going to the liquor store or
Yeah.
whatever you're using to mood alter the yearning, the pain that yearning for fulfillment brings with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here we are once again talking about this wounded child running the show who hasn't learned response ability. And I hyphenate those two words, the ability to respond. So I say to people, a sure way, if you just want to apply a basic layman's way of determining who or what you're dealing with, is everybody is born with abilities. We have accountability, sensibility, responsibility, vulnerability, reasonability. If we remove any of those abilities, we're drawing closer to disability.
Mm-hmm.
So this explains from an inventory angle. I have all these abilities. Am I responsible? Am I accountable? Am I being vulnerable? These are very important questions for character development. And strong characters are able to make strong decisions, since character is a major part of decision making. That one is able to lead one's life, the captain of one's ship, and make decisions and be responsible for their outcomes. Not for codependent, wounded, yearning for fulfillment children who came from neglectful homes or neglectful existences. And this stuff doesn't end at home, by the way. The neglect also gets perpetuated in our institutions like school.
Right. Well, I mean, this is what's so amazing, and I kind of want to bring it around to this whole COVID lockdown situation that we're in, because we're talking about a lot of people that are clearly yearning for fulfillment here. And it seems to them that they're going to get fulfillment from doing what the authority figure tells them and participating in this, like as you described it, a group think, without really making those choices for themselves. I mean, where does this come in terms of seeking that fulfillment? It just, the authority figure tells you to do it, everybody's doing it. And in order to feel fulfilled, it's just easier to make that choice to go along with it rather than it is to, apply your own critical thinking. It's because of the damage that was done as a child where you never felt that fulfillment. And it's like you're getting handed a ready-made fulfill. If you wear your mask, then the authority figure will praise you. You'll be the virtuous person.
Yes.
If you socially distance, if you follow the rules. And you're not going to be the kind of person that's going, wait a minute, why do we have these rules? What's going on? The science is saying that this stuff isn't helping, but we keep doing it. Magical thinking, like we talked about last week.
Yes,
And they're
exactly.
doing this because they think that they're going to find fulfillment, but it's like another addiction. Is that correct to say?
Well, again, the whole focus of people in this situation is they're trying to find the easiest way out, and so in effect they are doing what's easier rather than what's actually right. But here we have another expression of neglect, self-neglect.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about critical thinking. If you're neglecting yourself as a self, part of myself is to be a critical thinker. Part of a strong self. We spoke about character moments ago. When people are afraid, and when people are receiving information intended to scare them, as we are seeing today, that is a handsome recipe to reignite the fears of long ago, where threats were once prevalent in a person's life. They revisit those energies as if they're occurring today. Mm-hmm. They're not. They're superimposed on today by triggers. The lockdown is a huge trigger.
Right, exactly.
Very big trigger for people who have unresolved trauma. So what do? It's compliance. Wait for the abuse to be over. Don't do anything about it. Do what we did as children. Wait for the abuse to be over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they couldn't do anything about meeting their needs back then to defend, protect, comfort themselves. There was nobody there, no protection. They feel just the same floating sense of I'm just here, but there's no real protection for me. Everybody needs to feel safe. People don't feel safe right now, and they don't know how to create a sense of inner safety for themselves that would probably enhance their desire to go and get information about what they need to do for themselves to feel better, which would require some learning on their part, but they are neglecting to meet those needs. So they're doing to themselves what was once done to them. And again, it can be the lockdown. It can be about the vaccine and the anxiety around that, with all this information coming out into the mainstream media, and the narratives that they're pushing right now are clearly intended to continue to keep the fear alive.
Well, it's all phenomenally fear-based information. They're not giving anybody positive information except the vaccine's the only solution, and the vaccine's coming. But they're not really telling people about vitamin D or zinc levels or vitamin C, or how to boost your immune system,
or hydroxychloroquine, which
right.
was slammed forever.
Yep, and ivermectin now, which has clearly been working in other countries, as well as the Zelenko protocol, the hydroxychloroquine protocol. So it's almost as if, if you look at this whole thing psychologically, the fear coming from the mainstream media is going to trigger people into this childlike state, this somnambulism, this sleepwalking state, where they're going to take the abuse of the lockdown because that's all they could do as children when they were enduring an abusive situation, and they're back into that childlike state. They're not able to make these critical decisions because the fear has triggered them into this childlike situation where they were powerless, their needs weren't getting met, and they're just hoping that if they do what they're told, then they will get the fulfillment that they lack in their lives.
Well, this is it. And they're looking for everything on the outside. See, addictions and food and work, that's all outside stuff.
Right.
This is an inner life issue we're talking about.
Right.
Being projected onto the current state of affairs of a person's psychological life and how they perceive the world. If there was no real protection there for you back when you were younger, I can't see anybody not experiencing a lack of safety feelings in their current life. That can't not be there. It doesn't get erased through thinking. It's experience that a person is responding to. And since that registers inside of a person, their responses, the outer, is going to be a reflection of the inner. It's a sure way to know. So if somebody is constantly afraid and doing nothing to mitigate it, like, let's get some new information. Let's see if we can just begin to distrust what we think we know and be willing to go to another trough and find out what other information we don't have that can help us to change the belief about ourselves or others or the situation that we're involved with currently in the world. So when you speak of lockdown and you speak about people yearning for fulfillment, what they're yearning for right now, every one of us, is to be free of it.
Right.
Is there a saving grace here somewhere? And here we have the fantasy of the rescuer being born. People who are seeking fulfillment want to be rescued too. It's like, who's going to save me? Who's going to help me get back to my life, my authentic life? They don't realize that they're really mourning the loss of the authentic self, and that the more tools that self has acquired along the way, the better prepared they will be to deal with these kinds of stressors and lockdowns. They would be more available because of their development, would be more available. The currency of that development would avail them to learning more about what they can do for themselves to become better educated so that they can reduce the fear and prevent the catecholamines, the pain-mediating cells in the brain, from clustering that gets in the way of making healthier decisions.
Yeah, it is just amazing. This idea that somebody else is going to save us, and that if only we do what they tell us, then they will save us, rather than a healthy individual would say, I need to figure out how to get myself out of this situation.
That's right.
I need to do what's right for me.
We got to go back to the Wizard of Oz. And what were they yearning for? There was a guy without a heart.
Right.
A guy without a brain, was it?
Yeah.
Courage. And what was the other one? There was Tin Man. the scarecrow, and the lion.
Yeah, it's
Or
funny.
something.
I've been reading a couple different versions of this, and I still don't have it all straight. But
Okay. Well, anyways, their needs weren't met.
absolutely,
Right? Okay. And this
the
wizard,
man behind the curtain was not fulfilling their needs.
no, and he was scaring the hell out of them.
Right.
And right, they were buying it. But
Yeah.
then Toto came out of nowhere and, of course, got the curtain open at some point in the film, if you remember.
Yep.
And the wizard was all scared because he was
Yeah.
found out. They caught him. The guy pulling the levers. So right now we have a bunch of people reliving this childhood part of I need to feel safe and okay. I'm yearning for that. I'm going to try different methods, to accomplish that. Most of which will be counterproductive because nobody taught anybody. Here's how to deal with yearning for fulfillment in life.
Right.
Didn't get that textbook, right? So we need somebody to say to these people who are struggling in this area that, listen, it's okay. It's okay. Not everything, went as planned, but you have an opportunity now to make an actual choice. But let's make sure you know what your choices are. And the one main choice people must embrace is the choice to put themselves first. If you didn't get your needs met in childhood, you better know it. Because in times of stress and in times of trauma, we need that person there. And if we have children, we have to model this for our children. So if I'm an incomplete child, how can I give my sons and daughters what they needed if I didn't get it myself? I can't take my kids where I haven't been. I can't give what I have not got. I'm only afforded what I have on board to share with anyone. So for people who seek fulfillment, they must understand the first place to go is on the inside. Everything else is on the outside.
They've got to figure out how to fulfill themselves, and that's just it. Because if they don't, then and what we're seeing now is that these triggers, the fear can be used as a trigger. These old, it opens up these old traumas, and then that's a control mechanism, right? I mean, the wizard is using the fear as a control mechanism. It triggers these old fears, and then people are out of their minds. Literally, they're no longer making choices for themselves. They're yearning for the fulfillment, but they're not looking to themselves to bring it, and they're looking outside of themselves.
Yes, because they're kind of like on autopilot. They think they're awake making decisions. I said this a few minutes ago. They're not awake making decisions. They're basically living a conformist lifestyle where they just agree to anything, but they neglect to do any amount of research that corroborates what they're being told. And is it in my best interest? I mean, when people are awake, they're more resilient.
Mm-hmm.
They want to explore more. They want to question things more when they're awake. They're not afraid to speak their minds. When we have people yearning for fulfillment, they live very inwardly. They're reacting and responding on the inside to many things in life, but they don't share them with a lot of people because why? They're afraid of being judged. They're afraid of being contempted, humiliated, discarded, or ostracized, just as they were in the family. Mm-hmm. People expect to be treated the way their families do. It's the only template they have to look through, the only lens they can really look through. So this fulfillment is a deep expression about what went on years ago and how important what went on years ago is for me to understand. I've got to really embrace that. So if I don't do that, that can cause me a huge problem in my relationships, and it can go on until a person is no longer here if they don't turn around and say, what parts of me are missing? Where is my authenticity? People need to feel that sense of groundedness.
Right.
So if anybody's fortunate enough in life to have somebody in their lives that points this out to them, says, stop looking at the outside. Yes, we're locked down. Why is that? Yes, it's scary. We're losing our shirts. We're losing businesses. We're losing people. All this stuff is on the rise. Overdoses, suicide, spousal abuse. All of this stuff is throwing people into a spin of absolute disorganization. They don't know where it ends or where it begins. But
Right.
we've got to work to contain all of that. And if a person doesn't know how to contain that, this sense of lawlessness in their life pervades everything that they do.
One of the things I've been thinking about recently is that the longer this goes on, the harder and harder it is for people to break free of these cycles. I mean, it's just the stress is building and building. I mean,
Yeah.
do you have any kind of recommendations for what people can do? I mean, to try to regain the sense of themselves? I mean, what happens once you have this awareness, but you need to go through the healing process, you know?
Anybody that's identifying, and I've received a few messages and calls on this. Anybody who's identifying with some of the information that you and I are exchanging, I'm trying to keep this layman's. I'm trying to, stay away from the jargony kind
Hmm.
of stuff because people don't often understand that. I'm trying to keep this as simple as I can. But my recommendation to anyone who relates to what I am saying, the best thing to do is to ask yourself a couple of very simple questions. When was the last time I actually did an inventory of me? When did I actually sit down and spend time with the who am I? Because people are very other rated. They're always looking to other people, looking at other people.
Yeah.
Now that's easy to do. If observing is a wonderful thing. But it's kind of like I said when my seminars one time. I say to people, people feel so ashamed of who they are, and I say to them, see, your favorite uncle walking in the room. Oh, great, wonderful, nice to see you, Jack. See your best friend from high school walking in the room, Susie. Wonderful to see you.
Yeah.
And they're elated to see these people. Then I say, see yourself walking in the room, and they're like, oh,
Right.
okay, I can't see that person. She's invisible. She's invisible. So that is not a caricature of anything I've done. That's actually happened. People do this.
Yeah.
They're more interested in the other people and their influence and effect on them because the person themselves doesn't see the influence on themselves as having much value.
Yeah.
So they're other-rated. I took the Spanish existentialist philosopher Ortega, who says human life is characterized by within oneselfness. When we're talking about yearning for fulfillment, a person is not within oneselfness. They're living on guard. Animal life, always be guarded, leashed or never unguarded, always having to hunt your food. The hunter's coming and they're going to find out. They're going to find out that you're flawed and defective.
Yeah. Right. Right.
You see, you've got to keep that under wraps. So with that false self can never fulfill the yearning. There's no true self there to do that work with. So the asking the person, who am I? Asking the person asking themselves, who am I, is a very important question. Might seem basic, but the more it's a very complex question. And when a person begins to ask themselves that on a more conscious basis, they start to realize, wow, I got to work on some self-knowledge.
Hmm.
I've been too other-rated. I mean, people don't sit around the dinner table saying that, but
Right.
I'm other-rated today.
Well,
you know,
and then what's interesting to me too, I've been thinking a lot about this lately, is that people are so concerned with other people's choices now. Like if you're, perhaps thinking about yourself, understanding who you are, making strong choices for yourself as an individual, and then you don't feel like you need to control everybody else. I mean, I've just been getting amazed at all these political conversations that have nothing to do with politics. My personal healthcare decisions, I just don't want to. I mean, I was getting in an argument on Facebook a few weeks ago, and I finally told the person, "Look, this is what I choose to do. I'm going to choose to supplement with vitamin D, and I feel really confident that that's going to help me a lot. I'm not really scared of the coronavirus anymore if I've got enough of this vitamin D, enough zinc from my personal
get
decision
that
making." Yeah,
That's right. Get that vitamin D, folks. I mean, D3, because people, again, are finding comfort in the narrative of this father figure.
hmm,
These leaders of the household, of their household, are allowed to permeate their lives so readily because these people have not developed boundaries. They don't know what to keep out and what to let in.
Right.
Where there's a permeable ground there, okay? They're making a decision. So we got to pull the guessing out of this. And in order for somebody to really pull the guessing out of it, they need all of their authentic selves available to them so they can make authentic decisions. I mean, it's all part of the same full count. If you're not an authentic person, can you really make an authentic decision?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say authentic, I don't mean people are trying to scam people about their roles in life. What I mean is they're incomplete. They're not fully present. They can't be, because unless you get all of your needs met, you can't be fully present. It's a biological fact that in order for you to be whole and complete and feel a sense of lacking emptiness, not the predominance of emptiness.
Right.
But when a person arrives at a place where they're able to say, I feel really content about things today. I'm ready to face Lex Luthor today. You know, that sense of confidence is about my needs are met. I feel confident with who I am. And I've done the work of integration. See, we have a lot of people disintegrating, disrespecting, disillusioned. It's all the dis. We've got to get rid of the dis, the disorganized thinking, the disorganization. You know, and stop allowing people to so readily de-self you, invade who you are. This is very shaming. This is very characteristic of the pedagogy we were raised on. I mentioned this before. Alice Miller, one of my favorite writers, who wrote an amazing book, Hidden Cruelties in Child Rearing and the Roots of Violence. What is she talking about? The family. Somebody once said the most dangerous place for the American child is the family. Right. That people in a concentration camp are inwardly free to hate their persecutors and rescue themselves from this depth of depression, that they can share these ideas. This is not afforded a child in the American family. What a distinction.
Sure, you're asked to love. You feel guilty or you're shamed if you don't love your parents, who may, in certain circumstances, be your oppressor. You know, you're not allowed to have negative feelings about them.
It's chaotic love. It's you know, I need for you to obey me. I'll love you if you do. This is chaotic love. It comes with a contract.
Right.
You know, you got to sign here. You know, occultic love is, you know, to win my love, you must obey without question. That's an authoritarian style of love. But the chaotic love is, it's kind of like a bargaining deal.
Yeah, interesting.
You know? And then, so when you have the corrupt love, which is what we're dealing with right now, where, you know, these dysfunctional despots who want the world to believe that they have the best interests for us truly at heart, spouting their deeper meanings and agendas, who are corrupt. And this is what we're supposed to tolerate as a loving, growing, compassionate society. But everything's a mess. It's all disorganized. It's all the dis I just mentioned. And people think the way to resolve that is to acquiesce and conform.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those who conform are complicit in the results.
Right. And one of the things that I'm thinking of is the
formulation of those results. Sorry?
Well, I've been thinking the longer this goes on, the less people are going to they're not going to have their needs met. I mean, literally now we're having people that can't pay their rent. We're having people that are losing their jobs and they can't get food for their families. We're hearing potential food shortages coming in the future. And so, you know, even as adults who may even be relatively functional, at least in a regular kind of time period, it's only going to continue to get worse and worse. I mean, people who maybe even now still feel like they're getting their needs met. They have you know, attained a certain level of adulthood where they could take care of themselves. I mean, it's going to get harder and harder. And even people that are you know, pretty solid characteristically are going to start getting triggered, because they're going to find themselves with less and less of their needs being met in this situation. And so
deprivation leads to desperation.
Yeah, exactly. More and more of this. I mean, it's just going to continue to snowball.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, again, one final answer to your question. the best work you can do if you want to feel fulfilled is work on your inner life. If that means you have unresolved abuse issues or unfulfilled dreams or uh, uh, you know a hobby that you want to pursue that you've been thinking about but you've done nothing about, anything like that that can help you to feel nurtured and nurture that part of you that feels scared.
Yeah.
Go out and get her some nutritious ice cream or something, but
Right.
nurture that part of you that feels scared. A lot of people sit around and feel scared and do nothing about it. There are choices. It's just when we're afraid, I talked about cognitive closure that leads to cognitive dissonance. The thinking becomes narrow. We don't see the width of our choices because fear is that chemical emotion that does alter brain chemistry and stifles action. We've got to get people to take action. They're in grief right now. They're depressed. There's a lot of grief going on, and
Sure.
people are not always going to feel like taking action. But I say you must get yourself off that couch. If you're depressed, see your doctor. I do not like psychopharmacological intervention, but if your serotonin is causing you to remain inactive, if you are not taking your responsibilities seriously, taking care of yourself through all of this, maybe time to go see a doctor, get that, serotonin chemical reset, and then find somebody who can help you to deal with the history that led to the imbalance in the first place and that led to your inaction. You have to get these needs met
Yeah.
because deprivation will lead to depression, and you will starve your system of getting the needs met, which will be worse than what you brought forward from childhood. A big tax.
Well, this sounds great, George. We're probably a little over 30 minutes. We better cut it short. I know you and I can talk for hours. So but this was some really good information, I think. And I really hope, I mean, not only that people can understand that they can do this kind of self work and then make choices for themselves, but the larger context, if more and more of us do this kind of self work, then we don't need the lockdowns anymore. I mean, we're putting up with this stuff because we are yearning for the fulfillment and we think we're going to get it externally. So when the authority tells us this is what you got to do, this is what we're doing, rather than looking inwardly, healing ourselves, and getting all the information from all the different sources that we can and making our own choices using our own critical thinking capabilities. So
Absolutely.
yeah, thanks.
You need to question everything.
Question everything. Absolutely. And make your own choices. Come to your own conclusions. And everything will work out.
So,
Other people don't have to choose what you choose, you know? You just need to think about yourself and
just
be in tune with
right.
yourself and make choices that work for you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. And so what's the topic for next week then?
Well, I think we're going to go into the shame-based self,
Great.
like actually take some time to describe the identity of this person, up with some of the previous as a reiteration. But as a standalone, you're going to be talking about shame binds, what actually is on the hard drive of the brains of the shame-based person.
Sounds awesome, George. I know you and I have talked a lot about shame just on the phone, kind of in preparation for this, and it is a root emotion for a lot of these other that triggers a lot of these other responses that we've been talking about. So we'll be looking forward to that one. And thanks for coming on the show today, and thanks for elucidating these points for everyone. I think this is, I really hope that this series gets out there and people kind of start to really understand not just how they can heal themselves, but how they can actually learn to have compassion for those who seem to be so controlling and so shaming, actually, in the current situation. Because I think only through this healing process and this individuation of ourselves first, then other people will heal themselves by your example. We don't have to engage in all of this dialectical, argumentative, circular arguing that goes nowhere and gets nothing done, and actually just ends up serving the masters of lockdown, right? Because
Exactly.
we're squabbling amongst ourselves. Nobody's actually doing the healing, and these fear-based tactics continue to roll over the vast majority of us. So thanks again for coming on, and we'll do it again next week.
Thanks for having me, Doug. Appreciate it.
All right. And everybody remember, you can check out the lineinternational.com for any information about what's going on up in Canada. There's the Line Canada as well in terms of the protests in Toronto. You still doing them? You're doing them every Saturday, right, George?
Every Saturday, Queen's Park.
All right. Awesome. So if you're up that way, I urge you to participate. And of course, you can always go to theshiftnow.com. And you can catch all of my other long form podcasts, a lot of my older work, as well as the entire Psychology of Lockdown series will be posted there. So thanks everybody for listening, and stay tuned for episode number 4 coming up next week. All right, take care. Have a great one.
All the best. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.